Russ Cochran here again with another small church training, and today I am joined by Brian Hammond. Brian is a conference superintendent in the Evangelical Methodist Church, and if that you don't understand what Evangelical Methodist is, just Google it and you can find out. But he's a conference superintendent. Brian, tell us a little bit about your background and where you've come through in ministry and where you're at now.
Okay, thanks for having me, Russ.
No problem.
I've pastored for years. I pastored in the Evangelical Methodist Church for about 5 years in North Carolina, and 10 years in Pennsylvania, and then was elected as conference superintendent 8 years ago. Just recently re-elected, and so I've done 15 full time. I've been a youth pastor part time and a lay pastor, but full time I've been a pastor for about 15 years, and then a superintendent for 8.
And you have some family history with pastors in your family and all that?
My dad pastored for 35 years, yeah. So I grew up in the parsonage all my life.
What group was he a pastor with?
Independent. We were Nazarene. He went to Ohio Christian University, but we pastored an independent church.
So you've kind of been in different realms as
I have.
a pastor, so that's really helpful. And you've pastored small churches and growing churches as well. And
yes.
So that's great. So as a superintendent, I know you go into a lot of churches. You go into some that are big, and you go into probably a lot that are smaller.
Exactly.
And so what I want to talk to you about is, you're not a member of those churches.
No.
And you may go once a year, twice a year. What are some pet peeves, if you will, when you go into a small church? What is helpful for an outsider? Because listen,
honestly, you're gonna let me do this.
Yeah. I want you. Yeah, as much as it's going to hurt me. Yeah. Well, see, here's the deal. I think sometimes we get lazy eyes, not on purpose.
Right.
Because we're there all the time. We get used to something that's just always been and it's a loving thing, but it may not be the best practice.
Right.
So what are some best practices or some things that you notice that you say, a small church can really help themselves if they don't do this or they do this? Right. I said do. I'm sorry as a pastor, but whatever they do.
I did that once. I took my vision team of one church that I had, and we went on a field trip. And we walked out in the parking lot, and I said, picture that you've never been here. What do you see? And they got fresh eyes and began to say, oh, look at that door. It needs to be painted. And then we walked in. We actually walked. Okay, now where would a visitor go or a guest? We walked in the sanctuary. What do you see? So we did that, and I do that every time I go. I can't help myself. I try not to let my pet peeves, but it's hard. But I do that every time I go into a place. So you want me to share maybe just a couple of things?
Yeah.
I recently shared with a pastor. He asked, and I was proud that he asked. He said, "Tell me what you see. Tell me." He did that with me. You're my superintendent. Help me. Tell me what you see. And I said, "You ready?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm ready." And I said, "Here's how I feel when I'm in your church. I feel as though I've come to you're having Thanksgiving dinner, and you've got a big family. And we're all sitting around the table about ready to eat, and I'm an outsider. You've met me, and you've brought me in, and you've set me down at the table, and I'm sitting there at the table, and you're all telling inside jokes and talking about Aunt Sally, and you remember when Bob did this, and you're all laughing, and you're doing family, and I'm sitting there at the table, and I don't have any clue of what's going on around me." Mm-hmm. And then I went on to explain what I meant, and I gave some examples, and I get it. I pastored a small church, and I get that when you come into a small church as a pastor, it's tough to change some of those old traditional things that you do. That culture, exactly. And what I tried to tell them is things like, when you I told the pastor, I said, "Hear me here. You need to begin to think and act like a larger church." Now, when I say large church, I don't mean be like Willow or be like Saddleback or model the big church, the mega church in your town. I don't mean that. Right. I mean, you think bigger.
My first church, Brian, was 6 people with my wife and myself the first Sunday I was there.
Right.
We were surrounded by 4 cornfields, basically, in the middle of Iowa. The third Sunday, I told them, I said, "We're going to act like we're bigger than we are." It was the church was called Tilton. I said, "We're going to have the Tilton Tabernacle Choir." So
all 3 of you.
Well, here's the thing: we had 5 people in the choir loft, Now this was early 90s. Had 5 people in the choir loft and 1 person in the congregation.
Right.
Because I said, we're going to act like we're bigger than what we are. I get that.
Those are the kind of things what I'm talking about. And so I said things like this. I said, when you make the announcement and you say, if you'd like to help with that ministry, call Sam. And I'm sitting there going, who's Sam? I have no idea. Think of yourself as being bigger than you are. If you were running 300 people, you probably wouldn't say that, because you might have more than one Sam, and you would realize that no one knows who that is. We've got this small mindset that everybody knows who Sam is. So I don't need to tell you to call the church office, or here's their email address. Or when we dismiss today, Bob, who's in charge of that ministry, is going to be out in the foyer. Go talk to him.
And probably it tells you a lot about your church if everybody does know who Sam is, that you're not reaching anybody new.
Exactly. And so that's what I mean by you're all using those kind of language. Now I'm going to share something else that's probably going to stir up some trouble.
That's good. I like that.
And it's not something I'm going to say, you've got to stop doing this. But I did when I pastored. And again, I'm not telling anyone that's doing it that it's a bad thing. But for instance, I go in these churches, and on Sunday morning when we've gathered to worship our Father and to celebrate, we're taking prayer requests, which I believe in prayer. I champion prayer. I model prayer. I mean, I believe in it and I practice it. Is we begin to take prayer requests on Sunday morning, and it basically just becomes, I'm having my toenail removed, next week. Would you please remember me in prayer? And this is what's going to get me in trouble. I'm thinking, I don't care. Yeah. I mean, I know Pastor so and so does, but I'm really going to. Can you edit this? Can you edit this out?
This is good. So let me tell you a story that might get me in trouble. I remember one time earlier on in my ministry when we did this very thing. We began to grow, and this guy stood up, a well-meaning guy. I love him. He was a little bit of a different kind of guy.
Right.
And he stood up and he said, "Preacher, can you pray for me? I've been having a problem with my anus." and the first thing, and if you know me, I'm always thinking, and the first thing I thought was, I'm not laying hands on it, and it was that moment.
Please edit this.
It was that moment I realized, I think preachers need to hear this, because sometimes there's things that come out in prayer requests that are very inappropriate, too. It's another reason. So at that point, I began to tell people, we're not going to do this.
Right.
It can become dangerous as well.
Well, what I did is I made it, and again, I believe in prayer, and I think we should, you ask not, you have not because you ask not. We need to share our burdens with each other. There's all of those things that we could talk about. So we did it on Sunday nights and Wednesday nights and in small group and in Sunday school, and when we gathered, for special times of prayer, we would do that. But on Sunday morning, it was to focus on worship and to make sure that we did not do anything or say anything that made people feel as an outsider.
That's right.
Now, even when we did that, even when we didn't do those kind of things on Sunday morning, there would still be times where there would be special prayer. There was something urgent, and I might mention it as the pastoral prayer. We need to pray for this, or we might have someone come and anoint them with oil, or whatever, pray for them. But we didn't take 20 minutes to share our prayer requests around the dining room table at Thanksgiving dinner when there were outsiders sitting there going, I don't know what's going on. I don't know.
I just came here to eat.
I don't know what these people are doing. And so anyway, and again, I'm not zeroing in really on that one thing, but just kind of a culture of think differently. And think bigger than you are. What would you do if you just not everybody knew everyone? And so that's kind of the thing that I my pet peeve.
Yeah, we use
all of those.
Yeah, we use abbreviations for a lot of things. Meet us at the XYZ building.
I did at times too, but I did as well. But using VBS. What's VBS?
Yeah.
Well, that's Vacation Bible School, or FLC, Family Life Center, or all of those kind of things. And we even do that in our denomination, EMW and EMM, and what is that? Trying to take a real thoughtful approach at making sure that you don't do those kind of things, so that people understand and don't have to So what are these people talking about? So
Yeah, reaching this next generation, we do have a traditional service in our church. And we have contemporary services, but in our traditional service, I never use the word hymnal. I tell
songbook
I say
or
songbook just because there's people that
don't even know what a
hymnal
hymnal is. Yeah.
Grab your hymnal. They're thinking, grab a hymn. Who am I grabbing? You know.
That's right.
And so yeah. First of all, we don't want any of that going on.
Right.
So just the words we use and trying to be inclusive, not compromising the gospel.
Oh, absolutely not.
But being inclusive so that people can feel good about themselves being there and hearing the gospel clearly.
Exactly. Yeah, and I didn't always do a great job of that, but I tried to think differently. And now in this role, I see it a lot more as I travel from church to church and see those things. And I don't go to the pastor and say, you shouldn't do that. I did recently, and he may see this because I know he's on Facebook, but I did recently, there was the pastor had a big orchestra that, interestingly enough, and a big pulpit and an organ that wasn't being played, and it was just, and people were trying to get up on the platform, and I said, why do you have all that stuff up there? Get rid of all that stuff. And I think I kind of threw him a little bit. So I don't try to just go and say, you need to do this and you need to do that. But since you asked, I thought I'd tell you.
Well, it's kind of like having a secret shopper. And so some of you small church pastors, you may just ask a friend. They don't even have to be saved. Say, hey, can you come and just tell us what we need to hear about the church? You're not asking them to judge your sermon as far as spiritual content, but what is it that is attractive about our church? What is not attractive about our church?
What didn't you understand?
What did you not understand?
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
That's very good.
Exactly.
That's good. Well, thank you, Brian. Appreciate
thank
your
you,
time.
man. Appreciate you too, Russ.
That's another quick minute here with a small church.